It began on a crisp Saturday morning when I was sitting on the porch of my lake cabin, sipping coffee and enjoying the still water, when I noticed a glossy envelope tucked under the door. The header read in bold, "Mandatory HOA Enrollment Notice." My eyebrows shot up as I flipped through the papers. They were filled with rules, fines, and dues I was supposedly obligated to pay if I wanted to remain in good standing with the community. I knew instantly whose handwriting was behind it. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the lake and president of the HOA. She was notorious around here for acting like the sheriff, judge, and jury rolled into one. She told people what color they could paint their doors, what cars could be parked in driveways, and even how long grass could grow before a violation was issued. The trouble was, my cabin wasn't even part of her HOA. I bought this property years ago, free, clear, and intentionally outside her jurisdiction. My deed specifically excluded my land from the HOA's governing authority, which is exactly why I bought it. I wanted peace, privacy, and no meddling neighbors. So when Karen herself came marching up the steps later that afternoon, clipboard in hand and an arrogant grin plastered on her face, I was ready for the confrontation. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You'll need to sign these papers today," she announced, shoving the clipboard at me like I was some unruly student. "Everyone around here is required to join the HOA. Dues are due at the end of the month, and we'll expect compliance with community standards immediately." She rattled off a list of absurd rules, from banning fire pits to approved curtain colors. I didn't even reach for the pen. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of coffee. "Not interested," I said plainly, handing the clipboard back without signing a thing. Her smile vanished in an instant, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Refusal to comply will result in consequences," she snapped. I smirked and replied, "This cabin isn't in your HOA, Karen. Never has been, never will be. You don't get a vote on what I do here." She gasped like I'd slapped her, muttered something about community obligations, and stormed off my porch in her kitten heels sinking into the dirt driveway as she stomped away. I thought that would be the end of it, but just before sunset, the sound of gravel crunching announced the arrival of a police cruiser. An officer stepped out, adjusting his belt as he glanced at a notepad. "We got a call about trespassing," he said, looking more confused than confrontational. "Caller says you don't actually live here and might be stealing from the property." I almost laughed. Karen had really called the cops on me for living in my own house. Instead of arguing, I calmly handed him the deed, the tax receipts, and even the title papers I kept in a fireproof safe. He looked them over, eyebrows climbing higher with every document. Finally, he let out a chuckle, shaking his head. "Sir, you're the rightful owner, no question. But there's something funny here." He glanced down the road where Karen stood, arms crossed, glaring like a hawk. Then he leaned in closer and lowered his voice. "She didn't tell us you're also listed as her landlord." The officer's words hit Karen like a thunderclap. From the porch, I could see her stiffen, her arms falling slack at her sides, her smug expression instantly replaced with confusion. "What do you mean, landlord?" she barked, marching toward us, her voice shrill enough to startle the geese on the lake. The officer held up a hand to keep her back, clearly tired of her antics, while I reached into my folder again and pulled out the lease agreements. "It's pretty simple," I said, keeping my tone calm, almost casual, because nothing irritated her more than me not rising to her bait. "This cabin here isn't part of your HOA. But that little cottage you've been living in rent-free for the last 6 months? Yeah, that one's mine. You pay me, or at least you're supposed to." Karen's face went pale as I handed the officer the paperwork, the signed lease agreement, her personal information, and the overdue balance statements. The officer's eyes widened. "So, let me get this straight," he said, looking between us. "You own the property she lives on, and she's your tenant?" I nodded, sipping my coffee like it was just another day. "Correct. She's about 3 months behind on rent, actually, but instead of paying, she's busy trying to bully me into an HOA that doesn't apply here." Karen exploded like a firecracker. "This is a lie. He's twisting everything. That property was never his to begin with. The community agreed. The community doesn't supersede the county clerk's office. I cut her off, sliding another document into the officer's hands. The deed to her rental cottage, notarized and recorded years ago. The cop gave her a look that could have melted steel. Ma'am, if he's your landlord, you've got no business calling us to harass him for living in his own home. In fact, if what I'm seeing here is accurate, you're the one in violation, trespassing, withholding rent, and filing a false police report. She sputtered, opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Her face turned beet red as neighbors began to gather, drawn by the flashing lights of the cruiser. Murmurs spread through the small crowd. Wait, Karen rents? She doesn't even own her house. The cracks in her authority started to show. For years, she'd lorded over everyone, parading around as if she was queen of the lake, dictating rules and issuing fines. Now the truth was spilling out in real time. Her throne wasn't built on power, but on borrowed land. The officer, clearly done entertaining her tantrums, finally turned to me and asked, "Would you like to press charges for harassment?" I shook my head. "Not tonight, but I'll be handling her lease violation formally. Consider this her notice." Karen's eyes widened in horror. "You can't evict me. This is my community, my HOA," she screeched. I simply smiled and said, "Correction, this is my property. The HOA doesn't own a thing here." That was when Karen did the one thing I should have expected but still found laughably desperate. She pulled out her phone and started calling an emergency HOA board meeting right there on the lawn, ranting about illegal landlord tricks and fabricated paperwork. But all I could think was, she had no idea how deep a hole she'd dug for herself. The following week was a spectacle, the kind that small lake communities talk about for years afterward. Karen doubled down on her campaign against me, plastering ridiculous HOA violation flyers on my gate, accusing me of unauthorized occupancy of my own cabin, and even sending out emails to the neighborhood claiming I was a fraudulent squatter. What she didn't realize was that every stunt she pulled only added fuel to the fire I was already building against her. While she strutted around like she was queen, I had been working with the county courthouse to file a formal eviction for unpaid rent and harassment. When the official stamped copy came back, I smiled. Karen was about to get a reality check she couldn't ignore. On a warm Thursday morning, I waited until the HOA board gathered in the community hall for their so-called emergency meeting. I strolled in, papers neatly folded under my arm, and all eyes turned as the room fell silent. Karen, seated at the head like a dictator in pearls, smirked as if I'd come to beg. Finally decided to join us. Huh, she sneered. I laid the eviction notice on the table in front of her. "No, Karen, I came to serve you with this." Her face drained of color as she unfolded the document, her hands trembling. Gasps echoed around a room as the words notice of eviction stood in bold at the top. "Effective immediately," I said loudly enough for every neighbor to hear, "you are required to vacate the rental property located at 214 Lakeshore Drive, a property which I own and which you haven't paid rent on for months." Karen shot up from her chair, voice breaking into a shriek. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she and the nearest board members could hear. "You were, but presidents can be impeached, and tenants who don't pay get evicted." I leaned back, louder now. "This is not just about unpaid rent. This is about harassment, false police reports, and abuse of authority. You crossed the line." The sheriff himself walked in at that exact moment, the same officer from before, holding the finalized order. "We're here to enforce this eviction," he announced. "Ma'am, you've got 72 hours to remove your belongings." Karen's jaw worked soundlessly as the board members looked anywhere but at her. Some of them were whispering, others smirking. The mighty Karen, who fined neighbors for lawn ornaments and docked people for parking too close to the curb, had just been dethroned. By the weekend, her cottage was empty, her car gone, and the neighborhood buzzing with the story of how the HOA president had been evicted by the very man she tried to control. Her grip on the community evaporated overnight. and suddenly people began knocking on my cabin door to thank me for standing up to her tyranny. As for Karen, the last I heard, she was trying to start over in another county, her reputation in tatters. And me? I finally had the peace and quiet I bought this lake cabin for, a silence made even sweeter by the knowledge that the self-appointed queen of the HOA had been toppled by nothing more than her own arrogance and a landlord's signature.